Hello students, today we are going to study about the active and passive voice. I know students, it's a vast topic, but it's not difficult. If you pay attention, you will understand very well. So, here we go. There are two voices in English, active voice and passive voice. These questions are asked to you in the exam. Whether you are in 9th standard or 10th standard, grammar is a part of your subject and therefore active passive too is asked in the exam for 1 mark. And so, let's see now. Examine the following sentences. Rama hits the ball. Now, Rama hits the ball. It's a sentence which has a subject, verb, and the object. The ball is hit by Rama is also a sentence, but there is a difference, though it sounds same. Now look here. In the first sentence, the verb hits shows the subject Rama does the action or that the subject acts. And who is acting over here? Rama. Rama is the subject in this first sentence. The verb hits is therefore said to be in the active voice. So, what is that? The verb hits is therefore said to be in active voice because it shows who is doing the action. In the second sentence, that is, the ball is hit by Rama. In the second sentence, the verb is hit shows that the action is done to the subject, the ball. The action is done. What is the action, student? The action of the hitting is done to whom, students? The ball. And so, the action is done to the subject, ball. So, the verb is hit, therefore said to be in the passive voice. So, students, I told you, though it shows you, it gives you the same meaning. One is in active and one is in passive. Then, over here. Passive means receiving or suffering. Passive, the moment you understand person is passive and person is active, means you know that one who is doing the action, who is very active, is active and passive. And so over here also in English somewhat like that. Passive means receiving or a bit suffering. The object of the verb in the active voice becomes the subject of the verb in the passive voice. I will show you now the example. The object of the verb in the active voice becomes the subject. As I told you, Rama hits the ball over here. When we saw Rama is a subject, hits is a verb and the ball. But in the second sentence, the object which was the ball has become subject. Is hit has remained as it is. An action has been done by whom, students? By Rama. And so, therefore, have a look over here. The active voice has the subject before the verb. Example, the boy washed the car. What is the verb over here, students? Washed is a verb. What is the subject? The boy is the subject and the car is the object. Students, before the verb is the subject and what has come after the verb is the object. Remember in this sentence over here, subject is the boy, object is the car and washed is the verb. Now, look here. The passive voice has the object before the verb. Since this sentence is into active voice, what has happened? The subject is before the verb. But what happens in the passive voice when you have the passive voice? Passive voice has the object before the verb. What is the object in this sentence? In the first sentence, the object is the car. If it has to be before verb, meaning the car was washed by the boy. And that is in the passive sentence, is in the passive voice. Remember, students, in active voice, the active voice has the subject before the verb, and which is the verb here? wash is a verb over here, and therefore the boy is the subject, the subject before the verb in the active voice. Whereas in the passive voice, what happens? Washed, the verb is over here, but what has happened? Object has come before the verb. And what was the object in the first sentence? The car. And so the car was washed by the boy. When the subject is the doer of the action and the action passes from subject to object, the sentence is in the active voice. When the subject is not the doer of the action, rather the action is done to the subject, the sentence is said to be in the passive voice. So students, in the passive voice, what we understood? Passive is a receiver, or is in short the one who suffers. Okay, and the active is the action is being done and which has been shown to you is the active voice. So now let's see. The boy washed the car. The boy washed the car. Active voice. The action of washing passes from the subject, the boy, to the whom, students? To the object, the car. Remember, verb. What was the verb? Wash. When the active goes, when the object goes before the verb, it becomes into passive. Now, the boy washed the car. Active voice, the action of washing passes from the subject, the boy, to the object, the car. Now, look here. The car was washed by the boy. The car. I told you, object has gone before the verb, and therefore, what happened? The car was washed by the boy. Passive voice, the action of washing is done to the subject, the car, and by the boy. Look over here. I have highlighted it. Why did I highlight it, students? For you to know that this part which I am teaching you right now is important. And you need to pay attention. It is important, but it is not difficult. Remember that. And so, example, they sell petrol. Over here, what happens, students? It is in the active voice. They is a subject, sell is a verb, and petrol is the object. Every sentence has a subject and the verb. Object also. Object can be one, object can be two. But students, remember, when you do, now we'll see that also. Look over here. The sell, as I told you, sell is the verb, they is the subject, and petrol is the object. And it's in which voice, students? It's in the active voice. Now, just see the interchange. Subject becomes object, object becomes subject. Subject becomes object. What is the subject over here? They. And what is the object over here? Petrol. Now, while turning the sentence into passive, the object will become subject. Okay? And so, petrol, verb remains as it is. Sell becomes sold with the, by doing into past participle with the auxiliary. So, petrol is sold. You add by them. Why them? Students, they change when you are turning into passive voice. Active, they will change into passive them. So remember, look over here. The table in this, I have made something like active and passive. I will change when it is into active. When it goes to passive, I will become me. The action has been done by me. I did something. But when I change it into passive, I will become me. He will become him. He kept the book on the table. The book has been kept by him on the table. She becomes her, we become us, they become them. Remember this change, students? If you know this to change, and if you know when the past participle has to be used with a singular, plural, or it's into present, past tense, then you will know that change the voice is very, very easy. So, what has happened over here? Petrol is sold by them. In the second sentence, the petrol which was object over here has become subject. Sold has become sold, has remained into the same place, into the place of verb, and then object. What has become object? The subject, they have become object. Okay, now let's come down. For you, something to understand. Transitive verb. How will you know, students? Now look over here. Why and what is a transitive verb? Transitive verb is a verb that takes an object after it. What is that? It is a verb. It's called transitive verb. A subject that takes an object after it is called transitive verb. For example, Tom killed the snake. She ate an apple. He wrote a letter. All these three sentences are, students, in which tense? They are in past tense. Now look here, note. To find out whether a verb is transitive or intransitive, ask the question whom or what. What question you have to ask, students? Whom or what. And to ask whom? To the verb. And if you get an object as the answer, then it is a transitive verb. Look over here. Now, Tom killed the snake. To whom you have to ask the question? You have to ask the question to the verb. And what question will you ask? Whom or what? So, look here. Tom killed a snake. Question you have to ask is what or whom? And to whom you have to ask the question? To the verb killed. Tom killed what? Tom killed a snake. You got the answer. Over here, you got the answer. Therefore, you know that it is a transitive verb. Then, look here. She wrote a letter. Now, what you have to ask? What or whom? She wrote what? You have to ask a question to whom? To the verb. So, she wrote what? She wrote a letter. Okay? Then, transitive verb. A verb that does not take an object after it, that is a verb, is called an intransitive verb. Birds fly. The bell rings. The tree grows. Over here, this is a intransitive verb because you cannot ask the question, and by asking the question, you do not get the answer. Answer has to be the object. Now, that is about transitive and intransitive. Let's go to the active and passive. Now, the active voice is used when, students, when the doer of the action must be mentioned, or when we want to give importance to the doer of the action. Ajay donated some money. What is the example, students? Ajay donated some money. Now, once again, look here. The active voice when is used when the doer, who is the doer? Ajay, of the action must be mentioned, or when we want to give importance to the doer of the action. Over here, Ajay is a doer. And donated is a verb. And what action has he done, students? He has donated some money. Now look over here. The passive voice is used when, students, look there, when we do not know the doer of the action, or we do not want to give importance to the doer. Either you do not know who the doer is, or we do not want to give importance to the doer. You do not want to know who has done it. You are not interested in the person who has done it, but you are interested in knowing what has been done. And so, therefore, example, my pocket was picked. Now, somebody has done that. Somebody picked my pocket. You do not know, neither do you want to know, but somebody, maybe it's in the train or in the marketplace, in the public place, when you were in the crowd, your pocket was picked. And therefore, you are giving importance to what? This is a passive voice. Somebody picked my pocket. My pocket was picked. Picked by the thief, or by a child, or by a beggar, or by a poor man, or by a rich man. You do not know who has picked your pocket. Somebody picked my pocket. That is in the active. Now, when more interest is taken in the thing done rather than the doer of it. Example, 8 terrorists were killed by the police. 8 terrorists were killed by the police. Over here, by the police, it's the doer. So therefore, the police killed 8 terrorists. The first sentence, the 8 terrorists were killed by the police, it's in the passive voice. And how do you know that it is in the passive voice? Look over here. After the subject, a terrorist, we have the verb, they were killed. And after the verb, we have for the object, by the police. Okay, now you know that here it is the past participle verb, okay, and by has come in the sentence, so therefore you are sure that it is into the passive voice. I am going to give you some tips for it also, but just before that, and so the police killed 8 terrorists. The police killed 8 terrorists is into active voice. The action has been done by the police. On whom the action has been done? Action has been done on the terrorist. And what is the action has been done? They have been killed. Then example 2. The holiday was announced yesterday by the principal. The holiday was announced yesterday by the principal. It is in which tense, students? Once again, it is in the passive voice. How do you know that? Because it is with the past participle plus by whom the action has been done is mentioned over there by using by the principal. So the principal announced the holiday yesterday. So active voice of it is the principal announced the holiday yesterday. Students, have look at the verb. It is in which tense is more important. Accordingly, you will be turning the sentence. Now, tips to change a sentence from active voice to passive voice. The tips have been given to you to change a sentence from active voice to passive voice. You saw now, right now, some examples, 2 examples you saw about the terrorist being killed by the police, as well as holiday has been announced by the principal. They were into passive voice. So now, subject in active voice takes the place of object in passive voice. We saw initially also, I explained it to you when we saw how subject becomes object and object becomes subject. Rama washed the car was washed by Rama. Okay, you remember that first example, no? Now, object in the active takes the place of subject in passive voice. Again, I have shown you through the arrow. We have seen through the arrow in the previous example. The third, in most of sentences, by is used before object in the passive voice. Just over here, I explained to you also. I have explained it to you. The holiday was announced yesterday by the principal. By is the use over here after the verb, and it is used after the verb before the object. And what was the object? The principal. So you know it is into passive voice because you saw just after this the principal announced the holiday yesterday. It's into active voice. There isn't by. Neither have you been shown into the past participle. Then, and students, once again over here, look here. The past participle of the verb is used with the proper form of the verb to be. The tense of the verb to be agrees in number, singular or plural, and person, first, second, third, with the subject. This is what you have studied before when you were even in 7th standard, 6th standard, 8th standard. You know what is the first person plural, first person, second person singular, plural. You know it very well. Okay. Now, just see change of voice with direct and indirect objects. What is it, students? Now, sometimes a sentence has 2 objects. I told you initially when I was explaining to you, a sentence can have 1 object, sentence can have 2 objects, or sentence can even have 3 objects. Okay. So sometimes a sentence has 2 objects, the direct object and indirect object. It is easy to make the indirect object the subject of the passive voice sentence. The direct object can be made the subject of the passive voice sentence only if it is a thing or an idea. Remember that the indirect object is the first object. Indirect object is the first object. I have made it bold. I have underlined it something important you need to remember. So the indirect object is the first object that follows the verb. The direct object is the second object. The direct object is the second object. Now example, Rakesh lent me 50 rupees. It is the active voice. Rakesh lent me is an indirect object. 50 rupees is the direct object. It is in the active voice. Now look here into passive. What will you make? I was lent 50 rupees by Rakesh. Got it, students? Rakesh, which was subject, became object. Okay. And what was that, students? What you had got? Lent is over here is a verb. 50 rupees was the object. Now, students, over here, we assume that it was I, and the sentence is into past tense. So, was lent 50 rupees by Rakesh. Passive voice with indirect object as subject. I suppose, students, you are understanding, you are able to understand what I am teaching you. 50 rupees were lent to me by Rakesh. 50 rupees were lent to me by Rakesh. Passive voice with direct object as subject. Now, change of voice of interrogative sentences. You know, we have done in the some few days back we had done the class on the sentences when I was explaining about interrogative, assertive, exclamatory sentences. So something over here, change of voice of interrogative sentences. Now what is it? Look here. When we are asked to change the voice of a question, remember that the sentence with the changed voice should be a question. We have to recognize which is the subject in the sentence, whether the sentence is in the active voice or passive voice, then make the changes accordingly. Now look over here, question word, subject, verb, phrase, object and by phrase. Just I have divided it for you to understand. Look here. Sentence is what? Where did they find this ring? Where did they find this ring? For your understanding, you see, I have put. Now, what is the question word? Where did? Okay. What is the subject? Is the they. What is the verb, student? Verb phrase is find, and object is the ring. And it is in the active voice, and you are told to do into passive. Remember, now what will come? Where. Since it is did, we know it is very much did, find is in the past tense, and so therefore where was this ring found by them? Because subject is they, became object by them. Where was this ring found by them? Active into passive. Okay. Now verb phrases in active voice and passive voice. The verb phrase in the active voice sentence is different from the verb phrase in the passive voice. In the passive voice, the verb phrase always has some form of the verb. Be, am, is, are, was, be, been, be, just before the non-finite verb. Okay. Now, have look at this table, students. Have look at this table. I have highlighted it for you. It is important. See how the sentence from active with the tenses are becoming into passive when you turn into passive. The first sentence over here, present tense, I bake a cake. A cake is baked by me. I bake a cake. I is the subject, bake is a verb, a cake is a object. Object becomes subject, a cake. The verb remains into its place. It is into which tense? Present tense. Therefore, it's baked by me. In the past tense, I baked a cake. A cake was baked by me. Students, since it is baked, you are using, in the first sentence, it was present tense, so you use is. Over here, was because it is into the past tense. Future tense, I shall bake a cake. A cake shall be baked by me. A cake shall be baked by me. Present continuous tense. I am baking a cake. A cake is being baked by me. Students, present continuous tense. What is the sentence? I am baking a cake. I am baking a cake. A cake. What is the action is being done, and so therefore a cake is being baked. Past participle of bake by me. Into past continuous tense, it will be I was baking a cake. A cake was being baked by me. A cake was being baked by me. Okay, now look at these sentences. Example. Example of simple present and simple past tense. People make butter from milk. Butter is made from milk. Butter is made from milk. It's understood by people. So I did not use over here by. Okay? By people. The action has been done by people. Active into passive. Don't people make butter from milk? Isn't butter made from milk? People made butter from milk. Butter was made from milk. Didn't people make butter from milk? Wasn't butter made from milk? Students, have sit quietly, peacefully, and have look at the sentences that I read it for you just now, the table that I just explained it to you with the tenses, and then you will be able to understand why and what the changes are. Changes are made and how accordingly the sentence according to the verb, okay, and then into interrogative as there are the question marks. Just come down now. Examples of present, past, present and past continuous tense. Students, past and present continuous tense. Now look here. The peon is ringing the bell. The bell is being rung by the peon. Is being rung because the action is getting done. Is the peon ringing the bell? Is the bell being rung by the peon? Rung is a past participle of ring. The peon was ringing the bell. The bell was being rung by the peon. Over here, by the peon, we are showing who the action is doing, by whom the action has been done. Who is the doer over here? Was the peon ringing the bell? Was the bell being rung by the peon? Okay? So students, here are the 4 sentences into the present continuous tense, and here are the here are the 4 sentences into simple and present continuous, into simple present and simple past tense. Okay, so students, have look at these sentences, go through this class once again. I am going to stop it over here with these examples I have done. In the next class, when I do the next class for you, I will give you some more sentences for the practice. Have look at these students, just scrolling going up. Okay, I want you to have look at this. I want you to have look at this. Just look at the sentences, active and passive voice. Please students, do your lessons well. It's important. Have a good day.